Moose. Randy Kramer's on. Doesn't look like.
Thank you everyone for joining. We'll just give it another minute or two. I see that we still have people joining. Before we begin, just be sure that when you join, you mute your line and you hide your video as well. Thank you.
Who's talking?
Before Michael gets going, I feel compelled to welcome everybody and also to thank everybody on this panel that's being a part of it, and Michael for facilitating it. The people you're looking at, if you're a Musical Fair patron, you're looking at a wonderful group of talented artists and people we are very proud to be a part of and to support and to have them support what we do. So thank you all for that.
State Capitol grounds was buried in the 1940s.
And as Michael would say, don't forget to mute your microphone.
I do. I can hear Alex Trebek, so I Jeopardy this evening. But I think we will get started now. So if everyone could again mute your lines and hide your video as well, we will get this going. So thank you for joining us tonight for the Musical Fair Directors Forum. My name is Michael Wakowiak. You may recognize me on stage at Musical Fair recently in such productions as Elf and Ragtime. And then I've also directed Disenchanted and Forbidden Broadway for the premiere Cabaret. I also have plumbing going on upstairs for me right now, so forgive any loud noises that you may hear. But now I'm going to introduce our panelists. So first, we have Lynn Curcio-Fermato, we have Michael Wallin, we have Doug Wyand, we have Susan Droz, we have Victoria Perez, we have Chris Kelly, and we have the Artistic and Executive Director of Musical Fair Theater, Randy Kramer. So just a quick layout of how the evening's going to go. We have some questions that we're going to go through with our panelists, and then we have reserved time at the end of the evening for questions from you, the audience. So there is the chat feature on Zoom, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. If you're not and you're on a desktop computer, it's going to be right down there at the bottom of the screen. You can, as we're going through, you can put in any questions there that you may have, and we will be sure to touch on those at the end of the evening. So to get started, also it is important to note we are recording this, so just letting everybody know that as well. So we're going to start with a quick lightning round to get everything started. So I'm going to ask all of you, what was your first professional directing gig? What was the first show you directed for Musical Fair? And then also, what was your favorite show that you directed for Musical Fair? I'm going to go in the order that I see you on my screen. So Lynn, I'm going to have you kick us off. Oh, and also let me unmute you before you. Sorry, I'm trying to unmute you now, and it is not letting me.
Hey, Lynn, if you can just unmute yourself.
Got it. So I was starting to say a few years ago, so that I would not be discriminated against for age, I took off everything from my CV that happened before 1980. So I'm not sure exactly at this point what the first show is that I directed, but I think it was one of the Gilbert and Sullivan pieces for the Amherst Community Church. My first show at Musical Fair that I directed, not really sure because I served as a choreographer for a lot of the pieces at Musical Fair. So there were many, many shows, and somewhere in there I got to do my first directing gig. I do know that one of my favorite shows at Musical Fair was Song of Singapore. Song of Singapore was a crazy, wonderful, amazing time, and it was one of my favorite theatrical experiences. There you go.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Next, we'll go to Michael Wallin. You may need to unmute yourself, Michael.
Can you hear me? Excellent. So actually, the first show I ever directed professionally was actually at Musical Fair, and it was Pippin in 2000. Wow, 2000, 2001 season. And my favorite show I've directed at Musical Fair was, I think it was Zuma Zuma, which is a show I wrote with Jim Runfola about the music and spirit of Louis Prima.
Thank you, Michael. Next, we'll go to Doug.
Hi, everybody. My first directing gig was also at Musical Fair in the same season as Michael. We literally did back-to-back shows as our debuts as directors. So I did Pageant the Musical. That was my first show in January, February 2001. Wow. And I don't know, that's one of my favorites, but I would say my ultimate favorite show at Musical Fair is probably Avenue Q, both incarnations of that. It was just a marvel to behold all the magic come together. So.
Great, thank you. Susan, we'll move to you next.
Let's see. My first professional show was a small show you may know as My Fair Lady, which was at Musical Fair. And my favorite show is really difficult. I have to be very honest, at the point of maybe sounding a little cheesy. Every piece I work on becomes my favorite. So my current favorite would definitely have to be Fun Home. But I hold such deep heart memories with all of them.
Thank you. We'll go to Victoria next.
Hi, all. The first play I directed, or the first thing I directed was a play, and it was Real Women Have Curves by Josefina Lopez. And that was at Theater Plus, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was a women's theater company inside of Alleyway Theater. So that was my first play back in like 2007, I think. And the first musical I directed for Musical Fair was just a few months ago, Cooking at the Cookery. So that by default becomes my favorite.
Yes, and that's the last show that was running a music fair. We're going to now go to Chris Kelly.
Hey, the first thing I ever directed was a one act whose name I can't remember, for part of something that BUA used to do and sometimes does, called Pride Fest, a collection of one act plays that they usually do during Pride Month in June. The first show of note that I directed for BUA was Dracula, which starred Jimmy Janowski as Professor Van Helsing. It was certainly a notable time. And the first Musical Fair show I directed was Oliver, a number of years ago now. I'm with Susan. I find it really tough to pick a favorite one, and I thought I had one a few minutes ago, and I've changed my mind 5 times since. Oliver's certainly up there. The Drowsy Chaperone, Peter and the Starcatcher, Hair was a lovely time, and I think I really I'm so proud of the work that I did with Victoria on West Side Story most recently.
Excellent, thank you. Just a note to our audience, because I think I hear some noise. Just be sure that you are on mute, please. And we'll move to Randy.
The first show I ever directed was a play. It was Sister Mary Ignatius Explains It All for You, which was a lot of fun. I was with something called the Core Theater Group. Back around that same time that Lynn started not including those shows in her CV. And then first, when I directed for Musical Fair was our first show, Nonsense. And I directed it from the piano. Well, I directed it, but also played it. I didn't know any better at that time. And as far as favorites go, I'm with Susan and Chris as far as it's so hard to choose. I mean, there's just moments that just sort of pass through your memory. You know, I mean, I had really fond memories of our first Superstar down at the old Pfeiffer Theater, where we put the Spring of Life protest into the show. You know, I've fond memories, great memories of falsettos down there. Once that I did with Michael Wallin not too long ago. So yeah, they're all great memories, and enjoyed them all.
Great, thank you, Randy. So our next question, I often find that it's easy, especially you know, for audiences to see the first time they notice somebody acting, or the first time they notice someone singing, and kind of what inspired them to then go down that path, if that's something they were interested in, or say, you know, the first time you saw a beautiful piece of art and you decided you wanted to be a painter. I think it's an interesting question to ask directors if they can pinpoint when's the first time that they saw something that first made them want to be a director. So whether it's just a production as a whole, or if you can pinpoint the exact moment in a show where you kind of had the first spark. So I'll open that up to anyone. So it looks like we'll go to Doug first.
This is hysterical, and Lynn, you might be able to answer this better than I can. But so I don't know if this is really direction or choreography, but when I was about 11 or 12 years old, my mother and my aunt took me to see the first national tour of Dreamgirls at Shays, starring Sharon Brown, who was incredible. I still remember her when I was 11. But in that moment of, in the number I Am Changing, she's singing this song, and a spotlight narrows and narrows and narrows on her face. And the second they hit the crescendo of the song and the key change, the spotlight opens back up, and she is in a completely different costume and never moved from her spot. And that blew me away as an 11-year-old. Technically, I'm assuming it was direction, or at least a directorial idea, whether or not the director staged it or it was choreographed that way, but probably a combination of all of them. But that was the moment that I was like, I want to do theater, and then I want to try to make stuff happen as opposed to just do the stuff all the time. And like, of course, then I had to start off as an actor first, but that's what I did. So that I can specifically say was the moment for me.
Great. Lynn?
Well, on Dreamgirls, obviously, Michael Bennett was both the director and choreographer, so it was the director. He did have a co-choreographer, but he was director-choreographer. So for me, it was a couple different things. I've always seen pictures in my head. I've said this many times. It's usually to music, but also, of course, reading, voracious reader. So the imagery of creating stories and seeing them like completely lit in costume has always happened for me. But my very first Broadway show was Ethel Merman in Hello, Dolly. And Goward Champion's work on that show, again, a director choreographer, every little moment. And I mean, from them turning around the outside of the dress shop to become the inside of the dress shop, from Minnie Fay in the dancing number being caught above Barnaby's head, looking down, looking out at the audience, and then just collapsing over his shoulder. I remember every single moment of that show. And so it was both a director choreographer thing. And then, as I'm sure many of my dancer colleagues can say in this group, you know, if you can choreograph, they also start to think you can direct, and you get those opportunities. So there you go.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of bounce off of that because I was more interested in choreography and dance before directing. Funny story, I went to UB And I didn't take my first dance class until I was 20 with Lynn. And I was an architecture major, a landscape design major for 2 years before even thinking of doing theater. And I was hooked. And I saw how precise Lynn was with her intention and the direction and the choreography. And that's kind of when I fell in love with musical theater. But even going further back, I come from a figure skating background. And my sisters and my mom and my dad and I, we would all watch the Olympics. And Jane Torval and Christopher Dean performed Bolero. They were an ice dance couple from England. And everything about this performance in the 1984 Olympics was perfection. And it was one of those things, it's like, I want to do that. So I think that for me, the idea of figure skating kind of, and I was like a football player and I didn't have a figure skating body. So it transferred into the art of dance. And I was lucky to have Lynn as a mentor nice and early to help form what choreography and direction was for a musical.
Thank you, Michael. And I think you're not alone in that. Often kind of where we end up comes from sometimes the strangest of places. And I think that knowing you, that path makes perfect sense. So we'll go to Victoria next.
I think that, and I'm surprised by what's happening in my brain right now. I didn't know that this was going to be the answer. I've always seen life through the lens of a stage. Like growing up, my family would always have humongous gatherings with tons of, music and food and a lot of people. And I remember as a child, and I still do, I would just sit and watch, and I would put it in my mind. It was a play or it was a show, and I would figure out why this person needed to move this way, or I would make note of why that person moved that way, or the picture that was being formed. Or anytime I'm at a concert, I always think, oh my God, this is a beautiful musical moment right here, right at this moment. So I think that that's just naturally the way my brain has always worked. And thank you for the question, because I just realized that.
Well, we are really just here to help for self discovery. So I'm glad we could help you tonight. Chris, Randy, or Susan, anyone want to take this one next? Randy?
I only did that to give Susan and Chris more time. I played, I have a graduate degree in classical piano. And when I was playing my bachelor's recital at UB, I was approached after the recital by a woman who was the music contractor for Art Park, Mildred Pala, a woman I really grew to be very fond of. And she was very gruff. Millie would smoke a million cigarettes while sitting at the piano. But she got me to Art Park to be an accompanist for the summer musicals. And this was when they were really in their heyday of summer musicals. I think Gary Beach, who won a Tony, came through there a bunch of times. I think it was Tony for producers. I think it's Richard Green, the voice of Gaston and Beauty and the Beast, was on stage. I mean, it was great people. And so I was just sort of like the second or third pianist, and you'd have one rehearsal going on in the main room, which would be like the entire chorus. And then there'd be some book work being done. And I would tend to go and do the book work. And I worked with a director. We were doing Camelot at the time, and Bud Whitney, again, a director of some renown in New York. And so I was just playing underscoring for this scene that he was working on. Now, I remember playing it and watching it as he went through it. And they finished it, and I thought to myself, wow, that's really good. That's really good. And then Bud said, let's do it again. And then he said a couple words, and then they did it again. And I went, oh, that's better. That's pretty interesting. Boy, good for him. He got it. Then they stopped, talked to him some more, said, let's do it again. And so it went like that, and it was like a class for me. For someone who's never taken a theater class in my life, those were my classes. And it was just fascinating to me that could continue and go on, and there was always something to find. There was always something to develop, and that's the fascination for directing that I still have to this day.
Thank you, Randy. Chris or Susan? Looks like we'll go to Chris next.
When I was a kid, my parents would take me to Ocean City, Maryland, and there was a small little playhouse on the boardwalk called the Parker Playhouse, and they did children's theater, and they did it in rep, so you could go one day and see something, and you can go another day and see something else. And I just found it transportive, and I was enraptured by it. So I mean, that's the germ of the beginning. that led to me convincing my very loving parents to do things like rent video cameras so I could make movies with my friends. Mr. Wallin was perhaps involved in those. And but I would say theatrically, and it makes sense now, I'm connecting the dots as well, listening to all of this, going back to that very small Parker Playhouse and the boardwalk, that when I went to Upstage for the first time, I felt that same, I just love intimate theater. And Kelly Bocock Natalia's production of Godspell really shifted something in me. It was just the right show at the right time, and I knew after that this was something that I wanted to do and I had to do.
Thank you, Chris. And last but not least, Susan.
Oh my God, I feel like my brain's going a mile a minute too. You know, I had a Godspell moment, which was in high school, but I had this moment where my parents, their date night was going to the Schubert in Connecticut and not bringing the kids. And so they would come back with a cassette tape, and we would imagine what Big River was, except my dad would turn down the volume during goddamn government, and we never knew the words of it. Like, we would be driving around and we were acting everything out, the Nonsuch, you name it. And so we would imagine this, me and my sisters, I have two sisters, Carrie and Nicole, and we would do that. And I too have this memory of the Olympics. And while you just said it was 84, which doesn't make sense that my mind would remember it, because I always thought it was like 88. Honestly, I know that moment, but I actually thought that the collection of all the people in the, like, processing in, whose job was it to bring all those people together? Whose job was it to have those projections? Whose job was it to create that stuff? All the way to like the most maybe current in my early adult years was, I remember sitting in the Irish Classical and seeing Paul Tadaro's Ionesco's The Chairs, and watching all the chairs coming in. And I had not read the script. I had no clue what I was going into. I was going in to fulfill a paper. And I remember sitting there going, I wonder what that was on the page. All the way till now, I have a confession. I feel like it was always in me to direct, but it was that other people saw that in me and then gave me opportunity. It wasn't me going, I have to be a director, I have to be a director. I have claimed it as part of my identity now, and I love it more than I can probably give words to. But it was people seeing me lighting up at the Olympics, or me organizing my sisters to perform in the yard, or me having a conversation. Someone's like, you really should do this thing. And then I'm like, oh, you're seeing a thing? Oh, okay. I'll do it with love. And so that's mine. I think that I'm always enlightened by all those moments and just keep fueling it in, which seems like a backwards way to admit my journey. But all the directors that I'm sharing the time with right now, numerous times I've been in your production, your house, as either a designer for you, and or an actor for you. Lynn, I was in your Steel Pier. I understood what for the first time, every minute of every rehearsal counts to every second of your life. And that was a lesson that like I instill in mine. So, I mean, I think all of the things spark me wanting to be a better director every single time, if that helps. Constant learner. I love to learn.
Well, and Susan, thank you for doing my job for me, because you just brought us directly into the next question, far better than I ever could have. So getting onto that topic of collaboration, it goes without saying that collaboration is key to any successful production. How do each of you individually work to foster that collaborative environment in your rehearsal room and beyond, into the technical rehearsals, into performance, between actors, designers, technicians, kind of everyone involved in the theatrical process? I'll open this up to whoever would like to take their first stab at it.
Got it. It wouldn't let me touch the button. I was like, what the hell? Anyway, so ultimately, when I stage a show, when I'm directing a show, when I stage it, I like to do this thing I call power blocking, which is just block the heck out of it real fast. Like literally be like, here's where you enter, here's where you're doing this is where you're moving this is what this piece of furniture is coming on. Just get it down on paper. That's pretty much the only thing I quote unquote mandate, and that's not even mandated. You know what I mean? So like I'll give them their blocking. That way they have a base to work from, and a lot of people have a lot easier time memorizing lines or lyrics when they know what they're looking at or where they're standing. So it helps with that from the beginning. And then after that, I kind of insist on working together as opposed to telling them what to do. Like, I mean, I'll give them choreography or I'll give them an idea, but I want the actors to come to the table with stuff too, and I want the designers to come to the table with stuff. You know, if something is specifically called for, I'll obviously, from a design perspective, be like, we really need this. But like, other than that, like, yeah, go for it. See, let's see what'll work, what won't work. And I might bring in ideas, but I've never found it interesting to be like, what I need is what should be. There's no such thing as like the right answer to it all, I suppose. So I really just like seeing how it all swirls and swirls and swirls until it congeals into what the final product ends up being, and hopefully a good one. So that'd be my answer.
Thank you, Doug. Michael?
I'm a little different. I think of it as, initially it's project management, and you have to, like I live and die during my day job with a spreadsheet, and I have my spreadsheets for shows as well, so I can give them to the stage manager to be like, this is what we need to do. But there's also a lot of, there has to be collaboration, because I go in saying I don't know everything, and especially as I get older, I say, you know, I need more help telling this story. One of the big things that I do is after every rehearsal, I'll circle up the actors and I will ask, how was tonight for you? And it's, for me, that's important, because you're giving an actor a seat at the table. You want to either celebrate the aha moments that happened, or you really need to listen and write down the things that still do need to happen in order to make the path clearer for the storytelling for the actor. I think the actors appreciate that. It goes all the way to final dress rehearsal. We do that. So right from the beginning, right to the end. Just want to make sure that it is as collaborative as possible, but it's also, for me, I need to have that project management aspect, so I know exactly where I am, especially as a director choreographer, because you have your choreographer notebook and you have your script and you have your music and you have all your notes, and everything is beautifully color coded. That helps me out a lot.
Having been in a show directed by Michael, I can attest that sort of powwow afterwards does really help, because we take for granted how much, no matter what facet of theater we're in, that if you just get up and leave, you leave with everything. That means you leave with the joy occasionally, but you also leave with any of the anything that upset you. And so getting to be on that stage and collectively share is a perfect example of a collaborative spirit that moves the whole production forward. Lynn, I think I saw you had your hand up, so we'll move to you.
Great. Well, I also, as many people can attest who've done shows with me, I do come in very organized. I love the research aspect, but I have, as I get older as well, been really blessed to have worked on shows that are in preparatory stages for like 2 years. So I'm really able to listen and work with designers before I go ahead and put anything down on paper, which of course is also color coded and highlighted with everybody drawn in. But so it's been, for me now, the collaboration starts way before we even cast the show, in regards to building things together. And what that has done for me as a director is open up what my brain will be able to input, because one mind can only think of so many things. So I do come to the table with the concept, with the way I think the story should be told, but then having that much time for people to be able to give feedback and for us to go back and forth and to look at scenic designs and make changes, and costume designs and make changes, so that when we cast the show, we are able to really know exactly what we're looking for, and things may have mutated and changed along the way. So even with a show that's already on paper, it's almost like you get a chance to kind of write it from the beginning. So that's been awesome. Michael, I love your idea of the circle after. I tend to do my circles, especially in places I haven't worked before we do our rehearsals, but I love that idea. I try to talk to my actors throughout the process, whether it's off stage or on stage. And again, many of you have worked with me, so you know that I will stop you in the middle of something and we'll go back and do it again. So I kind of try to put my note taking in the process so that I can get feedback. And I'm so open to actors bringing to the table who they are and what I mean, you can attest to that, Doug. You have brought something completely new that I never even thought of. And that's the joy of working together as collaborators. And then when I get to choreograph for a director, because I've had many wonderful shows that I've got to do with Randy, it's just great to be able to hear that other person's voice and then to try to bring to life what they imagined in their mind. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
No. I am just something that Lynn said sparked. I am going to just put Susan on the spot and move to you next, because I think everybody comes from different backgrounds, but you have a unique situation where, especially at Musical Fair, you are the resident hair, wig, and makeup designer for all the shows. So not only can you speak about your own collaboration in the rehearsal room, but you have collaborated with everyone on this call in that way as well. And so I think you have an interesting perspective.
It makes me feel like I've got the biggest theater family in the world. I guess I am grateful, profoundly grateful, that I have been on the design side, and I've also been on the performing side, and I've also been on the directing side. I feel like when I'm a designer and I have designed for 100% of you, including Michael, like I've designed for all of you and in various stages, and I love when we can all get excited together. I have found that yes, if you choose a life in the theater, it's going to be difficult. I mean, it looks like it's always like so bright and shiny, but it's a lot of work. And like, don't get to see your family work, don't get to sleep work, but love triumphs that. And when it comes to design, you will work, if you've committed yourself to this life, you will work on many projects, and 100% of them will not be the greatest thing you've ever worked on. And I go back to when I'm designing, I have to find a love and a joy in it. And so that is what I think is key in collaboration. That is what I'm listening to from the director when I'm a designer. I just want to hear the thing that they really want, and then I get to go and think of how to give it to them as a gift, like to offer it up to their storytelling. So I get really excited being on that end. And then when I'm a designer, I always desperately want the same thing. I want us to be able to sit together and like wax poetic about moments of making the story come alive. And I really want everybody to be heard. So I do a lot of check-in throughout. It is just as exciting to me as when an actor shows up to rehearsal as when the set designer pops in. Like poor Chris Kavanaugh, I am like, Chris, you want to come out in my first read? How about my second, my third? Want to come again? He's like, oh, sweet, see? Chris is like, no, Susan, I put my time in. But everything from having the musicians, I would love every musician to come and hang out. I just want it to be a big everybody together all the time. So I'm grateful that I've been given the chance to see both.
Thank you. Victoria?
So I have a lot more experience directing plays than directing musicals, and it's a completely different beast to direct, a play than to direct a musical. But I start my collaboration with the playwright. I have to, it's my job to honor the playwright. So that's where the collaboration starts, reading the play and figuring out what is it that they want to say. What is it that they want me to see? And how is it that they want me to share it with the world? So that collaboration starts with the playwright. And then all that contextual research that Lynn taught me to do when I was in high school, meeting with the designers and sharing ideas and being inspired by how they see it, making discoveries with them, figuring out how we're going to collectively do it. I believe one of the main roles of a director is problem solving. So, how are we going to figure this out? How are we going to do it? And then finally, when the actors come in, I never set out to be a director. I was an actor way longer than I am a director. So I've always tried to direct the way that I myself as an actor wanted to be directed. So I really try to allow for the actors to be confident and secure in their instincts, because unfortunately, in your career, you can come across directors who stifle that instinct, as an artist. So I really try to watch body language of actors, and I try to let them block themselves. I'm really big on entrances and exits. Why you're entering, why you're exiting. Those are big ones. But the meat in the middle, let's figure it out together. And let's figure out how you as a human portraying that character wants to move. So that, I believe, is a big part of the collaboration. And then at the end of every rehearsal, I like to start off like the circle, like Michael and like Lynn. And specifically, I ask them to give not each other, give themselves a note. And that comes from me being a teaching artist, and I believe that you need to be a critical thinker, and you need to figure out, how to become better, how to improve. And it's different when you yourself can say, you know what, I think in this moment I could have done this, or I'm going to try this next time. And then opening up that line of communication. What do you think? How do you think tonight's rehearsal went? How do you think tonight's run went? And everybody goes around in a circle, and then I'll give my notes. So collaboration is the best part of theater. It's my favorite part.
Thank you, Victoria. And I think that also goes to why these times are challenging for all of us, because we're on Zoom right now, but we all would love to be in the room creating art with each other. So it's just good to be reminded of that. So Chris or Randy?
The director Sam Mendes once said that when he's in a room working with a bunch of other artists, it would be arrogant and reckless of him to assume that he has the best idea or the most creative idea. that hopefully, if you've assembled a team that you feel really strongly about, you have 8, 10, 12, however many other really creative brains in there too. And for the lot of work that I do, I think I really rely on that, and I rely on all of those collaborators so much, and it's just so integral to the work that I do. I hope that, you know, starts with the designers and goes through the rehearsals. I would love to say that I color quoted shit, but I tried for once. I tried once. I tried the tabs. I did it all. I did the show.
Know your strengths. Know your strengths.
Yeah, right. That was not mine. It's not mine. So yeah, it's a little more mad scientist-y, I think. But a lot of not all, but some of the shows that I do have a sort of devised nature. And when I say devised, I don't mean we're creating a script. There already is a script, but we're sort of creating the language of how we're going to tell the story. So that's integral, that that all of the actors are active participants. And I always say I'm welcome to hear anyone's ideas, but eventually it's going to have to be through my lens. You know what the final decision is. Another thing I like to do, I guess, depending on the show, is actor-led warm-ups, especially if it's something really, really physical. I love to do that at the beginning, 3 to 5 minutes. Have a different person lead a little physical warm-up and get everyone on the same page. I find if I'm working with an actor one-on-one, or working with a couple actors one-on-one, that I'll play like a 5-minute guided meditation that we'll all listen to, and then have a conversation about what to do next. And lastly, I would just say the collaborative moments. I mean, how to pick one to mention, but I just directed The Outsiders. Sadly, it only ran for 3 performances, but some of my favorite moments in that process were myself, the stage manager, and the 2 gentlemen playing Johnny and Ponyboy. We would stay after so many rehearsals talking about this story, talking about the characters, and just sharing new insights in our love of the story. And outside of any moment in the show, which I was and continue to be proud of, just those collaborative moments and conversations were so special to me.
Thank you, Chris. Randy, I'll leave it to you.
Sure. When we talk about collaboration, I'm a huge fan, and it's really one of the reasons why I got involved in theater. You know, like I said before, I have a graduate degree in classical piano. So when I was, you know, doing my bachelor's and then doing my master's, I was practicing 4 or 5 hours a day in a practice room, the piano, by myself. And it was the only, really, I love playing for people, but I didn't really enjoy sitting in a practice room by myself all the time. That was hard. There's an old story about Artur Rubinstein, the great classical pianist, and he would be practicing in a practice room, and then he would like walk down the hall, grab the janitor, and say, "Here, sit, listen," because art's really only made when there's someone else there. Theater's only made when there's someone else there. So I really fell in love with the whole collaborative aspect of musical theater specifically. You know, because and I've actually even used it as a business model for MusicalFare when it comes to our administrative staff. As much as I'm the artistic and executive director, I really like to think, you know, Doug might be able to testify yay or nay, but I like to think that you know, we all have our certain areas, but we all have input, and we all have perspective, and we all have insight, and that's what you're looking for in a collaborator. And in a musical theater, oh my gosh, you know, I mean, for everyone who's not on this panel but who's watching, you can't believe the amount of different areas there are for a musical. You know, I mean, you see it if you look in the credits list, but you know, everything from costume and lights and set and musicians and makeup and wigs and and choreography and direction and musical direction. Oh, the actors, yeah. And you put all that together, and there's two things I would add, because we were starting to get, a lot of us were talking a little bit about sort of directing philosophies. Number one, it is so fragile when it comes to putting theater together, and especially musical theater. You can have all those things that I just listed. You can have 14 out of 15 of them spot on, and you can have one of them that is just somewhere lost in the woods, and it can ruin a production. It can really ruin a production. So that's really scary. And that's another reason why collaboration is so important, because you don't want people working in silos, because that will happen. You want people working together so that there's a shared vision that they can push forward. My other tenet when it comes to directing is I try as hard as I can. Now I'm going to forget the word. I don't want to. I try to put off as long as I can settling for something less than what I wanted. And I mean put off, because what I've learned is if I settle in that first week of rehearsal, I have no idea the things that it's going to do the second, third, and fourth week of rehearsal. And so you hold off making compromises for as long as you possibly can. I'm talking actors, I'm talking design, I'm talking all of that. Because the second that you make one of those compromises because you think it's the best thing to do at the time, it ends up being like a thread that's getting pulled out of the costume. So anyway, yeah, like everybody else on this panel, I don't think you work in musical theater without loving collaboration.
Absolutely. Thank you, Randy. We're going to move the conversation now first into the realm of opportunity in direction in theater. So for a little background on this, I relied on some stats from the Asian American Performers Action Coalition and a study that they put out in 2018 of the 2016-2017 Broadway season. So of that Broadway season, 95% of all the plays and musicals were directed by Caucasians. The other 5% were African Americans, while there was no representation from Latinx, Asian American, or First Nation directors. Regarding gender, 82.5% were male, while 17.5% were female. Now, these stats relate to Broadway specifically, but I think they can be used to highlight a general disparity in opportunity. And so I wanted to start for the women on the panel. Did you find it hard to break into directing? And so I'm going to go to Victoria first on this.
I never set out to be a director. So I really can't answer that question. It was, I think Susan said it, somebody saw something in me. It was Kim Piazza over at Alleyway. I was working there as an actor, and she said, you ever think about directing? And I said, no. And she said, I really think you should be a director. And then everything changed. So I was lucky in that way. That was for a women's theater company, a company that focused on women storytellers and storytelling. So I think that I was, in the right place at the right time.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. That, and I think that's kind of the ideal situation that everybody hopes for. Lynn,
yeah.
or
and then also because of my theater company, because of Raíces, out of necessity, having to direct a show. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to finish with that.
Of course. Thank you. Lynn or Susan?
I just unmuted myself. So I would say that in the smaller market of Buffalo, New York, there have been people that were in power that were open-minded enough to give women chances. I was lucky enough to work with Neil Radis and of course Randy, and you see there have been many men in Vincent O'Neill, Saul Elkin. They have given women opportunities. The gentleman that I work for in Denmark has hired many, many female directors. So I think in our perspective here that it maybe was not as difficult to break into. But I will tell you that in the larger picture, I'm just going to give an example of the dance studio. If you walk into any normal dance studio, you will see 23 women and 1 man. And if you walk in, or seriously, you go to a university in a classroom, 23 women, 1 man, 22 women, 2 men. You go to Broadway, you go to any national dance faculty that's hired, you go to your regional theaters and go down the list, that changes a lot. So how is it that, you know, when you're out there, because it is a commodity and there are less men and they become something that's desirable, or because, you know, the man who is running that particular artistic venue wants to hire men. As a broader picture, I would say it is difficult for women, and there, as you see, there are not as many of them represented in the nationwide. But here in Buffalo, I think that the community and those who have been in charge of theater companies have been really quite wonderful and above the national average at hiring women to direct.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Lynn. Susan, would you like to speak on this?
Sure. With stating like that it was seen in me, I like to, you know, standing on the shoulders of others. It was actually, it was Victoria's Kim Piazza, but for me, it was Lisa Ludwig who looked at me and said, don't you want to direct? And I was like, oh, and pushed out of the nest that way. And she advocated for me, and she kind of threw my name out when there was an opening, and through trust and it has to just be trust. Randy gave me a chance to take on a behemoth musical. Like, I have this theory that 100% of my shows are more and more difficult every time I get one, which I love. I'm ready for it. Bring it. But it was based on a trust and an extension of that. I will tell you that Randy is the only one who's given me that chance. So it's not being done other places, and this is not to put Randy on the spot to like harbor for a job in any way, because I think Randy and I have actually been pretty good at being able to talk, you know, but like it's not every season, and I don't expect anything to be like, there's no expectation of here, and I'm grateful that hard work leads to the next project. I believe that for women, there is no real room to make a colossal mistake. I believe that I work on a very tight frequency of excellence just because it's my personality, but also because I want it to be so good and it feels so right, and I believe so much in it, so that I have the chance to do it again. Every time I direct a show, I'm standing there in the middle of it going, this could be the last time. And what does that look like in this area? And it's just a truth. That's nothing more than just that's my personal truth in it. I am happy to see other female directors. I was excited to have Victoria and Lynn on here with me too. I've noticed other theaters are doing it as well, but it's not equal in any way. And I wish it would be. And I think that part of wishing it would be is just continuing to talk about it, to continue to have those conversations about it, to speak up when you have the chance to. Yeah, Lynn.
I just forgot to mention that until COVID hit us, the next season at the Kavanoki was completely female directors. The entire lineup was completely female directors. So I do want to throw that out. And with Lorraine O'Donnell at the helm, I know that a lot more of that has been happening.
Great, thank you all. I think we'll just for time's sake move into our next section. Also, I know Chris Kelly is going to have to drop off soon, so don't think he's getting scared about any of the questions, because we're gonna turn into some serious subject matter. So I just don't want anyone to think that he ducked out. So getting into where we are presently as a country and an artistic community, I think we can all agree that we are at a turning point, and it's important, as we all spoke of, just to listen to many of our colleagues and to hear what they have to say, and then move forward, moving towards more inclusion, more equality, and creating a more representative artistic community. So with that in mind, I ask you what your hope is with these current rallies against racism and social injustice. How will that move to impact our theatrical spaces? I think we all have thoughts about what's happening, in maybe our personal life, but shifting it more artistically into those rehearsal rooms, into those casting sessions. What are your hopes? And now it looks Randy wants to take that first, so we'll start there.
Yeah, I think we talk about this search for equality in our country, and the very realization of systemic racism that has gone on for a long time and is continuing, and that impacts. I'm just talking as a theater producer, but that impacts. It obviously impacts me personally, but I won't get into that. But what it does as a theater producer is any of those systems that are set up to block equality ends up blocking people who we may be able to have on our stage, or people who may be able to direct or choreograph for us or work for us in other positions. If you look at this group here, and you look at Doug, and you look at Michael, you look at Susan, they all spent time, Doug and Michael, a lot of time on stage with us before they became directors. Susan, certainly as a designer for a long time, then a director, and so on and so forth. We need to keep reaching out to pull people of color and people that don't look like a lot of us into this musical fair family, so that we can do exactly what you guys are talking about. So there's that little sidebar conversation that somebody says to Victoria, right? Oh, hey, you ever think of directing? Or that Lisa said to you, Susan. Those are the things, that's how these things happen. But the problem is, if there are all these roadblocks, and I literally mean roadblocks, if you're caught driving while black in Amherst, you're not gonna work at Musical Fair. You're not gonna wanna work at Musical Fair, because you're not going to want to put yourself in that position. And it's happened, and it happens a lot. So those kinds of things do need to change. And if they change, there can be real change also then that can be reflected. And we're trying really hard. We have a lot to learn. We have a lot more listening to do as a company. But it would certainly make things more possible to be positive if we had a society that was also pushing in that direction. And I hope that's where we're going.
Thank you, Randy. Victoria, I think you had your hand up.
No, go to Chris, because he's got to go, right?
Chris.
Yes, I echo everything Randy said, and I've been privy to be in rooms with artistic directors in the community that have been having these conversations before recent events. And before I go, I think one really beautiful example of seeing diversity on stage in the city was the production of Christmas at Pemberley that Road Less Traveled did about a year ago, where because I think people still get caught up in this idea of, well, if we're casting a family on stage, everyone needs to look alike, and it's like, and that show was just such a wonderful beacon of I guess if we want to use the phrase still, colorblind casting. And I mean, I would just personally love to see a season in town when all the theaters just say, screw it. That's just how we're going to do everything now. And not worry like, oh, is it going to be strange that the mother and father are different race? Who cares? Who cares? It's storytelling. It's theater. I think that's one step. And I think another really important thing that I know I've had conversations with people about before is that we can't expect, because of the systemic racism in our country that is so pervasive, that these people are just going to appear either, right? The onus is on us to go to Paul Robeson, to go to these different places, to seek these people out and invite them in. I believe.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you for joining us. I know you're going to have to drop off. Victoria, did you want to go? I know you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's something that I heard in a podcast just the other day. Diane Guerrero, she was in Orange is the New Black, and it rings so true, and it moved my soul. She said, nothing about us without us. And I think that has been my life's mission when it comes to theater. And I think that starts, well, it doesn't start, but a big part of it is designers, BIPOC designers, writers that are writing our stories, the stories of people of color, because that's how we empower and that's how we have ownership of our narrative. And I've always thanked Randy because he did that. He wanted to do In the Heights, but he followed that. Nothing about us without us. And he said, I'm not doing this without Raíces. So I think that, first of all, that's how wonderful relationships get started and collaboration gets started. But if artists of color know that they have, and I know right at this moment, our voices are strong, and we're screaming, and it's a good thing. But I think that that's something that I will carry close to my heart forever and ever. Nothing about us without us.
Absolutely, and I think, and Doug, I'll get to you in a second. Victoria, I agree that also needs to extend to especially writers. And I know I saw a tweet the other day that was talking about Ragtime and Carolina Change and how important the stories were. And I saw it and I sat there and I thought about it and I said, those are important stories, but they were written by white people. And that doesn't mean that those stories aren't impactful with the subject matter that they chose, but I think it's a very important point that you highlight, that we need to let more people tell their own stories. And so, Doug, I think we will move to you.
This is just sort of piggybacking on something Victoria said, but to add a little different context to it. Victoria mentioned that we need to search out the people that we want to bring into the fold, and that we'd love to be collaborating with and love to fulfill artistic dreams with. And it's interesting, though, is that there's a lot of work to be done in a lot of ways. And this is me speaking as I'm the current vice president of the Theater Alliance of Buffalo. And I've been on the executive committee of that organization for about 6 years now, which is a long time. But I've also been working on the Theater Alliance auditions for at least almost 10 years now, ultimately. And I know Michael Wakowiak, you've helped with those too over the years. And in the last year, and it's gotten only slightly better, to be honest with you. Out of almost, I forget the exact amount, it was like 250 something people auditioned last year, and it was under 3% of those auditioners were any BIPOC people. There was between any minority, like literally it was lots and lots of white people. And it's hard to search them out if you don't know where they are and if they're not attending things that they are invited to. So there's the work to be done there to foster the relationships, to give everybody every opportunity to work and to be a creative force in the world. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be straightforward, but it's going to be ultimately rewarding once we, figure out the correct path to take.
Thank you, Doug. Lynn?
So, so many of the statements that have already been made are extremely powerful. And there is so much, as has been expressed, that we have yet to learn and lots to listen to. But part of this needs to get down to our educational system as well. We need to make opportunities for young people. There is no reason that in our country we can't have good education across the boards that is not determined by what you pay for housing. And there's no reason, just the same, that there shouldn't be healthcare for everyone available in a country such as ours. So I think part of what we need goes all the way down to the youngest of our children being exposed and nurtured and being able to think that it might be okay to pursue a life that would bring them into the arts, as opposed to thinking, I've got to somehow climb the ladder. I've got to somehow work my way out of this, because that's where it's begun. You know what I'm saying? Michael, my husband, and I worked at Cradle Beach Camp for many, many years. And I used to, of course, do shows. I had, people in wheelchairs dancing and dance at the gym. But I also had quite a few young people that ended up going into theater who maybe wouldn't have gone into theater because they were exposed to it in that situation. And so I do think we can amp up what we do in our educational system.
Exactly, Lynn. I mean, it all starts with how we educate the youth and the next generation. Michael, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, just quickly, I just wanted to say, so I worked at Theater of Youth for 15 years, directing and choreographing, and Meg Quinn is such an integral storyteller within our community. And I jotted down a quote that she would always say to me before directing a show. And she would say, your storytellers need to reflect your audience because these children need to see themselves on stage. And for her, it was the idea of having the audience see themselves on that stage, black, white, brown, big, little, everyone. When you're casting a show at Toy, it's imperative that it's all about the audience, because if you've never seen a show at Toy, sit in the back row and see the beauty of the audience in front of you. You have all these beautiful, you have the inner city kids and the suburban kids, and they sit next to each other and they're just watching. They're being educated by these beautiful stories. And I wish more theater companies would celebrate that, having difference on the stage to tell one story. So I think a lot of listening has to happen before that happens, but know that Theater of Youth is really paving the way, to Lynn's point, to help educate the young children in Western New York.
Thank you, Michael. And so, Susan, I will go to you next.
Michael, would you mind re-asking the question? Because I feel like I have a lot of feelings and a lot of things, and I want to make sure I answer the question. Don't just.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty open-ended question, just stating that we're at a turning point, which is a good thing, and that with all of the current rallies against racism and social injustice, how are we going to hope to impact our theatrical spaces? So moving past even our personal lives, how are we going to listen and learn, and ultimately what do we want to see moving towards that equality and inclusion?
Oh, you want to ask that question again? Because I have a lot of thoughts, and no, I'm joking. I think there are so many things, and the simplest answer may be making space. And it's from the ground up, like having space for houses where people can perform, having shared space on stage, looking at a season and opening it up to writers that are not what your audience is used to. And that's hard. That's a gamble. I understand that. Like 100% of what we're talking about is not easy. And I think that's the beauty of being a theater person and a collaborator in this time. It would be amazing if our government was filled with a bunch of theater people, collaborators, and like talk about, oh gosh, what if this audience doesn't love this show, but what if they love this show? I think as far as education is concerned, I also, being a full-time designer when we are not in a COVID situation, and also directing, I also teach. So it's putting plays in front of students where they go, oh yeah, like that they don't have to try to identify with Arthur Miller. Not that there's anything wrong with the history of that, but that they could sit in the works of like Dominique Morceau, just read and understand and feel and know that these writers are also writing and out there at the same time as they're also scrolling through what's going on in our world. So I think that it is creating space. It's creating space, and sometimes that will go in small steps and sometimes it will go in big, and it will happen in conversations, and it will happen pre and post production. Sometimes it will be that you just have to move over and let someone else tell the story. That may happen too. And I think that that is my hope for this. My hope is that those who are able to make space, and that they also make a space that's comfortable so that when they can extend the hand, like I understand it's difficult with tab auditions, but like if we can create a way to extend a hand where people feel comfortable and feel like welcomed in such a way to come to those auditions, then we're really doing our job and work. I don't think it's enough to just invite. And I also know that a lot of work goes into past just inviting. And so those are the things that I think we're going to really be looking at and starting with. Every day is a chance to start.
Yes, and Susan, I think what you said about making space is 100% correct, because you can't fit into a space unless there's space for you. And also, just on Susan specifically, because I know she won't get into this, I know that Susan teaches the August Wilson Century Cycle to her students, and that's not something that I know in my public education that I received. And I often wonder, going back to the education bit, not that there's anything wrong with Shakespeare or some of the plays that we read, but it's interesting to think about if we introduce plays by August Wilson or just other playwrights into more curriculums, because it just goes back to education and what you're brought up reading and what you're brought up viewing. And I think that you speaking now just made me think of that. So thank you. And so with that, we're going to move. We actually have eaten up most of our time with this great discussion. We're going to move into the audience questions. So I know there have been a few submitted. If you haven't submitted yet, now is the time. We have one that's very fast that Randy, you can probably answer, which is just when was the first show at Musical Fair, which at that point I'm assuming was Summer Fair.
It was Summer Fair. It was in July of 1990 at Catherine Cornell Theater. And it was the production of Nonsense. And just a funny story about Nonsense and about theater in general and about producing theater. I was living in New York in the 80s, and I had heard about this off-Broadway show called Nonsense. And I was relatively new to New York, and I thought, wow, cool, off-Broadway show, gonna be hip, gonna be really, it's gonna be on the edge. It's gonna be all the kind of theater I wanna see. And then I went to see Nonsense and was like incredibly disappointed in its material, but could but as a producer could understand why it would be a really smart show to start a theater company with. And I've lived in that little box for 30 years, trying to figure out what's interesting, what sells, and what's important. So anyway, July 1990, Captain Cornell, Summer Fair.
Thank you, Randy. We're going to move into our next, and that was from Linda. So thank you, Linda. The next one comes from Ben Siegel, and I think this is a fun question. So we're going to go into this one. Of all of the shows that you've directed, is there one flaw in the book or score that you would have liked to have seen fixed? I know unless you're working on new material, especially some shows that have been written many years ago, often there are bumps in the road, or there are sometimes just excellent shows that get produced that have like one dud song or something in them. Is there something that sticks out to any of you on that topic? Victoria?
Yeah, I think I did a show, I can't name it, right, Randy? The script was a musical, and the script was written, the script that I got was like the script that had annotations from the stage manager. That was the actual official script. So it had like, actor enters stage right, goes to the upper left platform and walks down the stairs.
No.
But like in big, bold red letters all over the script. So it was so difficult to get a true sense of what the story was, because you were constantly interrupted by the stage direction. And it was so weird and so difficult to figure out what the story was. And it was the consensus. Everyone, without talking to each other, everyone at some point needed to say something about how the script was formatted. So whoever's out there formatting scripts, take note.
Yeah, and that's going to stop you from discovering it for yourself if you see that it says exit stage right, but that doesn't work for you.
Right.
Doug?
I have two really fast ones. One was I was directing a bio musical, which shall remain nameless, a couple of years ago at Musical Fair, and the thing was written in different tenses for no reason. It wasn't like a flashback situation. It was literally like a character would be talking and it would suddenly go from present tense to past tense. And like, so we'd have to go through and change the verbiage because it didn't make any sense otherwise. And the thing was a success all over the damn country. It's not even like it was like we were the first ones to do it and it was a really rough draft. It had been done like at 30 theaters already. No one ever cleaned up the text. The second, and this is just a jokey one, but Lynn will laugh at this out loud. At the beginning of a chorus line, let's do the whole combination away from the mirror of 5, 6, 7, 8, and the music is not counted in 4s or 8s. The music that plays is like a 6. So it makes me crazy every time I see it. Anyway.
Oh, I love that.
Anyway.
And that's such an iconic thing that you have to hear it all the time and know it's wrong.
Yeah. I'm like, there's no 8 there.
We can move on unless anyone has another one that comes to mind. No? Okay, we'll go to the next one because it's another good question. Oh, Lynn, are you trying to say? Oh,
Randy had his hand up.
Oh, Randy. Hi, Randy.
Randy.
Sorry, Randy. Would you like to say something?
It's very short. It's very brief. And Ben, you'll laugh at this because I know from your review of it at Irish Classical, it is not your favorite musical. But I will agree with you on one point. Next to Normal, which I actually love as a musical, but for some reason, well, I know the reason. Again, producers got in the way, I would imagine. But it's this searing story that I think is wonderfully written, wonderfully done. And then the last 5 or 6 minutes, it's like they apologize for everything they put you through. Everything's okay. She's going to be fine. Life's good. It's like, no. And that should not be in that musical. Now, ironically, that's probably why it's popular, because I think audiences would be so devastated leaving the theater with the truth. But isn't that really what we're supposed to be doing? So anyway, that is one that drives me crazy every time. I sit there and enjoy the show forever, and then just clench my teeth in the last 5 minutes.
Thank you, Randy. One thing I will say before we move on is I too enjoy Next to Normal, but it has some tone problems. And when I saw it off Broadway, and there was still, the end of Act 1 used to be a number called Feeling Electric, and which used to be the name of the show. And so the Act 2 now is what opens with the Electric Shock Therapy. Act 1 ended with a full production number with lights, and it was funny, but ultimately you were like, why are we laughing at this woman being electrocuted? So I think that there's definitely a conversation to be had there about the Pulitzer Prize winning authors of that musical, that there is a few questionable elements. We'll move to the next question here, which is from Fran Dixon. So this is, I guess, going to be for everybody except for Randy, although Randy could answer this as well if you were, pretending you weren't running the theater. What is one show, if you were the head of Musical Fair, that you would insist on putting on next year? Lynn?
I really want to hear these answers. Please, go for it.
I want to do Bright Star.
Oh.
Ready to go. We have a great cast.
Yeah, for any of you who don't know, Bright Star was supposed to be at 7:10 this May, directed and choreographed by Lynn and produced by Musical Fair. So, Michael?
So I have two, and one, the rights aren't available, but I'd love to see Chicago done at Musical Fair. And for totally fun reasons, I want to do Legally Blonde. I think that would be very fun.
I co-sign on you on Legally Blonde.
Thank you.
Anybody else have one that pops into their head? Doug?
I just have one, and it's like a dream show for me, but I don't, it's so hard to cast, is Sweet Charity. And Lynn knows that's a damn hard show to cast anywhere. I don't care where you are, but just, so much fun, great music, fun story. Anyway.
Okay, so we will move on to the next question here. This is from...
Oh, wait, Michael, don't let Rose off the hook.
Susan, give us something. Come on.
Or Victoria. Either one of you two. We got to hear it.
I will think about it. But you definitely asked for next season, and I'm in a different place, so I'm thinking. So you gotta give me a couple minutes. I have no problem holding back when I have an answer.
Does it have to be an already existing show?
No, it can be anything.
I'd say the next American masterpiece, original musical, premiered at Musical Fair. That should be in the season. Don't know what it is, but it should be original.
Yeah. I like that. I don't think anyone would argue with that. I guess on that, before we move, Randy, is there a show that you have wanted to produce, but is maybe not necessarily the best producer decision, but just artistically is one that you've always wanted to work on?
Geez, that's hard. I've always loved, and Second Gen is supposed to do it now. I've always loved Secret Garden. Just love the music. I'd like to do Follies. I'd like to do something like that. But those kinds of things have to happen in a 250-seat theater. But I would hope they would.
Yeah, and Follies is hard just because of the sheer size of the cast and everything that you need.
And by the time you get to do it, everybody here is going to be old enough to just be in it.
I love it.
I would come out of retirement to do that for you, Lynn and Randy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. We have, so this is from Darlene. Thank you, Fran Dixon, for the last question. Is there any kind of show must go on stories that you can think of, whether it be an illness or an injury or the set falling down, just a kind of a fun story about when, theater has persevered in spite of something. Doug?
Again, I have two stories, but I'll make them fast. We were doing the 1940s radio hour, and one of the actors, John Weisenberger, had been working at his day job at TJI Fridays right before he came to the show, and was mopping the floor and splashed a cleaning solution in his eye. So just as the show's starting, his eye is all inflamed and it's all red. By the end of Act 1, it was swollen closed, and it was huge. And he was one of the leading young men. So we just had to make the executive decision to write him out for the second act. He just completely disappeared, and we reassigned his track to other actors in the show and just kept it going. He just disappeared, never came back. No one asked where he was. No one ever mentioned him again. That was that one. And second was we were doing Adrift in Macau that was like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. And one of the actors had a death in the family, and I was backstage for the show, and ended up one of the other actors in the show took the track of the guy who couldn't be there because of the death in his family, and I, as assistant stage manager, stepped into that other actor's track. We did, I think, 2 performances that way while things were shuffled around. But like, I think we missed 1 show or something like that.
Thanks, Doug. I saw the performance when you and Ben went on, and it was pretty incredible to watch. Lynn, I'll move to you.
All right, so I co-directed and choreographed the Western New York premiere of A Chorus Line for Anthony Kalinowski, AK Productions, and it was at Studio Arena. The second Tuesday of the run, Melissa Zuckerman, who was playing Sheila, twisted her ankle during the opening number, went over to her dance bag, put a bandage on, and, you know, we thought everything was okay. At 4:00 the next day, she called us and told us she had like torn all the tendons and ligaments in her ankle. And we could not get a hold of anyone who was in the cut group. So I made a costume for myself and went on as Sheila with absolutely no rehearsal whatsoever. That's my first one. I have made a career of this. My other big one, Susie Muha, who used to perform for Neil Radis at Tabletop Productions. She was practicing pirouettes in her bedroom and fell and broke her arm. So we were doing Little Mary Sunshine at the Plaza Suite. I went on that evening as Nancy Twinkle, no rehearsal. Of course, I had choreographed the show, but the big thing is the next night, and Roger Paolini can back me up on this, I went on as Doris in Owl and the Pussycat, a 2-hander, 3-act play that we were doing. We did at the Orchard Park Country Club. It was a traveling show. And I did that the next night. So there you go.
That is very, very impressive. Michael?
I just have a quick one. And the last time we did pageant, Doug directed, I was in it, and Michael, you were in it too. And Michael Hake passed away, our music director. And that was so devastating to the entire cast, because we had a show that night, and we didn't do the show obviously, but Randy came in and he learned the music in a day, and we went on the next night and we put Michael's glasses on the piano, so he was there for us for the rest of the run. So yeah, that was a definite show must go on moment, but he would have wanted us to do that. So yeah, that was probably one of the most incredible moments of camaraderie in theater that I've ever had. So
Yes, I 100% agree. I think, Lynn, did you have your hand up again?
I just wanted to say that those glasses on the piano, I mean, of course, I did many, many shows with Michael, but I choreographed a piece in tribute to him called Heaven's Got Heikioki for the Zodiac Dance Company at UB, where he also used to teach and musical direct. And his glasses on the piano were a big imagery motivator for that piece.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say. What Michael said is 100% true. It was a true show must go on moment. Randy?
Two real quick, one producer and one musical director. So producer, 1996, Musical Fair goes to Art Park to do a chorus line. The budget for the show is $300,000. The budget for our entire season of Musical Fair that year was $150,000. We only could do it because Art Park, basically, we didn't have a lot of costs up front. We just had a whole lot of liability. So I'm there, and we were doing the final dress before a preview. And Bianca Fiore is dancing, and she's playing Cassie, and she gets her heel caught in her rehearsal skirt, falls on her knee. Lynn knows all about this. And then we see her literally crawling off the stage. Now, I'm sitting in a 2,300 seat house that I know is costing about, $500 an hour just to be there. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we don't have a show. Anne went to the emergency room. We created a whole dream Cassie scenario where Anne could walk the role, but then we would have someone else dance the role because we didn't think Anne could dance. And the doctor told her, well, nothing's injured there, but you really shouldn't dance for at least 72 hours. She went on the next night for opening, and it all worked out great. But that was petrifying. The other one, Doug, you would appreciate this, and Lynn too. Swing, Swing, Swing. The first Swing, Swing, Swing. 5-person cast: John Fredo, Doug Wyan, Kathy Weiss. Oh, geez, now I'm going to forget.
Terry George and Michelle Sprata.
Terry George and Michelle Sprata. So we have a 2-show Saturday. We come in, I don't know, the show's starting at 4 or something like that. We come in at 3, and we find out that Doug is really sick and cannot get to the show, cannot even get off. I don't even want to go into the details, but he wasn't moving. And so, we were all pretty young and pretty young, sort of early into all of this. And so the 4 of us, the 4 actors and myself, we just sat backstage and redevised the entire show without him, and did the show twice that day. Nothing personal, Doug.
No.
But anyway, that was a bit of a triumph, and no one would have known.
Well, and God knows I've done my share of the other side of that, because if you recall, in More Shake, Rattle, and Roll, Michael Wallin lost his voice, and I was stage managing it, and I learned, and I'd been there the whole time in rehearsals, but then he taught me all the numbers, and he stage managed the show for like 2 weeks, and then we flipped back again. And Randy, Tim White, during American Rhapsody.
Yeah, I didn't really want to get in. Yeah, that was terrible. Tim White passed away during American Rhapsody the first time we did it. And we actually had 2 different actors play his role for the rest of the run. That was really tough. Tim was just such a wonderful person. And that was just such a terrible shock. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Before we depart, Susan alerted me that she does have 2 shows, so we are going to go back to, or 3. She came up with a 3rd one since she texted me, so we're gonna go to Susan.
All right, bear with me on this one. Ready? So I think it would be great to do a collaboration at 7:10 and do Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. I think that would be phenomenal. Then we do another collaboration with 7:10, full community production of Paula Vogel's A Civil War Christmas, which I've been begging to do for years. And then in our musical fair space, a collaboration with Raices, and I would love to do Water by the Spoonful by Chiara Allegra Hodes, which with a live jazz band playing Coltrane. There you go. Even though I know Victoria's worked on the show before, we should do it again.
I've done it, but we should do it again.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This was a great conversation. We were able to keep it lively, even though we're all in our own little Brady Bunch boxes. So again, thank you to Lynn and Michael and Doug and Susan, Victoria, Chris and Randy for joining and being our panelists. And thank you all for spending your evening with us.
And thank you, Michael, for being a great moderator.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you, Michael.
Goodbye, everybody.